Aloha, Dulles family.
Aloha. Mahalo.
We are so excited because at the end of this month, August 28th, it's going to be our end of summer
Back to school
bash. We're going to be having a luau. So August 28th, it's going to be from 4 to 8 p.m. We're going to have food, we're going to have games, we're going to have a photo booth. It's going to be super, super fun, and we hope to see you over there.
The location is beautiful. Christy and Adam Black are hosting this at their place in the Hamilton, Purcellville area. It's gorgeous. And so signups are on our website and our Dulles mobile app from 4 to 8 on August 28th. I'm trying to not look at you so that we don't keep laughing. And invite a friend. This is our meal for August. We're now eating together once a month. So this is not only going to be fun, but it's really going to be a meaningful time of connection as we celebrate the end of summer, as we launch into fall together, really valuing each other, our connections, our relationships.
Yep.
Sign up on the Dulles mobile app or our website. This is a potluck style also, so we'd love for you to bring something along with you. You can get those details online. Join us for our luau on August 28th.
Yep, and bring a lawn chair. That's another important note. Bring a lawn chair.
And this is our Sunday gathering that day, so we will not be at Lightridge that morning. We're meeting once on Sunday, August 28th. It's in the evening at Adam and Christy Black's house.
Yep, it's going to be a great time.
We also want to celebrate what happened this past weekend.
Yeah, the Dulles South Neighborhood Closet. How many pounds of clothing did we collect?
Christina said it ended up being either 405 or 410 pounds of clothing. Way to go, Dulles. They were so happy with our clothing contribution. And for those who served yesterday, this weekend at the event, thank you guys. We love being for Dulles with you. You guys make us proud, and we're excited to go into the fall serving our community together.
Yeah. And that's all the announcements that we have for today.
Yeah.
So enjoy the rest of service. We love you guys so much, and we'll see you soon.
Hey everybody, welcome to Dulles. Today is going to be different because I am going to really kind of do three messages in one. And I think altogether it's still going to be fairly concise. You learn as a communicator to really focus on the big point. Like what is the real objective that we're trying to communicate or you're trying to teach. And today I've got several, so it's kind of risky to do that. But all three of these relate to us being part of the most exciting idea on earth, actually being part of God's church, God's movement of love and change in this world. And so I'm going to just start with the first one, which is a thought that is from my own personal time with God. A couple days ago, I had this quiet voice in my spirit. I've learned, I think that's God. And it has to do with a project that the film festival team has been working on. And if you're new to Dulles, I lead here at Dulles. I also lead a film festival. A lot of people at Dulles volunteer in the October Film Festival every year, and it's a way for us to be engaged outside the walls of the church. So we can explain what the film festival is later. But there's a pretty exciting project that I and a couple of the film festival leaders have been working on for 4 months. I'm not going to get into the details of what it is, but it would by far be the biggest red carpet festival screening event that we've ever hosted in 11 years. And after the 4 months of working on this, I just had this thought the other day. What if this just doesn't come together here in the next month? What in the next couple of weeks? What if this falls apart or the event just doesn't happen? And the Brad, the me, the you in these moments can get discouraged or can really like, wow, there's been a lot of work that's gone into this, or this was such a great idea, or this would have been really exciting, or this could have helped grow the film festival, And that can lead to discouragement, like this just didn't work, or the plan didn't unfold the way that I wanted it to. And the God part of us, the Spirit of God in us, whispering to us and guiding us and leading us, can take us in a totally different direction from discouragement to something like this. And this is what I believe God was prompting in me just a couple days ago. Brad, where do you find your identity? And is your identity in something exciting that happens in the film festival, or in the way the church is growing, or even new people? We want new people coming into the church, and that's been happening this summer. We've been meeting some really great people, some new families who've joined us. Is my view of life and my value, or hey, I'm doing good for God, is it connected to circumstantial things that look exciting? Or is my identity, my value, my worth solidly connected to who God sees me to be? And so I just had this sense a couple of days ago that if this project that has some of the film festival team really excited about the possibility, if it falls apart, or the one of the special guests and another of the special guests can't end up coming in person, does it really change anything about me when God sees me as his son? And could it be possible that God allows a lot of work and energy to go into these things and then they just not work out? Could God actually be in that? Instead of like, God, where were you? I thought you were in this. Or you had me so excited. Or our creative juices were, really pumping, and then it just doesn't work. Where are you in that? Could it be that God is actually in the reminding you and me that, hey, you're not valuable because of something exciting that happens, or because a project works or is successful. You're valuable because you're my daughter, or you're my son. And that's it. I just love you. And in this world today where there's so much talk of identity, whether it's sexual identity, or whether it's really what I think is more prevalent is finding identity on social media, and how many likes and how many follows and who's paying attention to things we're saying. Our world is consumed today with identity. I was reminded a couple days ago in my own reflection and time with God, do I find my identity in Jesus loving me and coming to rescue me? And not loving me because of anything I've done or anything I've earned or how I've worked in some kind of religious construct, but just because he loves me. And I just have this sense that somebody watching today needs to hear this, or needed to hear this. And I want to tell you, I'm with you. You're not alone. If you are tempted to find your worth in your work, or how the church is growing, is the church getting bigger, or is your work project growing? Are you being noticed by your boss at work? Is there something exciting happening? A project that you're working on that gives you a sense of value? And I just want to say, listen, projects matter. God cares about our work. We're supposed to work hard. But at the end of the day, our identity is in the reality that God created you and created me. And he loved us enough to come into this world and pursue us in love. And that's it. That's really where we find our identity. Okay, that's message number one. Number two is this. We're talking in this series about the movement of God in the world today, the reality of God being expressed primarily through his church. And unfortunately, throughout church history, when people take control away from God, which can happen in the church, not just in the world, and not just in business, and not just in finance, it can happen in the church too. People can choose selfishly and can say, I'm going to be in control. I'm going to pressure people or guilt people into doing what I want them to do. I mean, that's actually a lot of what organized religion has unfortunately become. So we're not talking about what we've seen in church history. We're talking about the church that Jesus created. that church is his movement in the world, and it's the most exciting, most compelling movement or reality on the planet. A lot of people can struggle to find their way in that movement. Like, so many people just attend church trying to be reminded that God is real, or trying to be good, or trying to clean up the mess from the previous week. The thought of being part of the movement of God, it just seems so intimidating. And yet, it's everyday people. I mean, Peter was just a mess personally, and Jesus kept saying, Peter, I'm actually going to use you to change many lives and to start my church. When you look at the disciples, Matthew was a tax cheater, a financial cheat. He was a tax collector. Jesus used these very imperfect people to say, hey, I'm going to teach you my love. I'm going to embed my transformative love in you. And through imperfect people like you, I'm going to change the world. And so one thing that I've found, I hear this often with people, is that people can't even get through the day feeling connected to God. They just don't know how to live every day with a sense of momentum, like, hey, I'm growing close to God, or God is using my day. It's like people don't know how to own their own day. The day ends up owning them. They come home from work exhausted, dropping in bed like, oh, with so much going on, I'm trying to keep up. How in the world do I even feel connected to God? And so here are 6 things that I do. I've really worked on this over the years to become more and more consistent at these. It's a simple list we're going to go through. It's not going to take more than just a couple minutes. But you might want your notes app out on your phone or something to write on, because I think this is life-changing. It's taken me many years to develop this, or to kind of tweak this, or add one of these elements to my day. And I believe it'll be life-changing to you if you practice these. Okay, so the first thing that I do every day is I give my day to God. And I mean, this can take anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute to 5 or 10 minutes, depending on the day and depending on how I do this specifically. But one way I do this is I'll actually start my day on my knees. And this can look weird if your spouse is in the bedroom, but usually I'm alone when I get out of bed, or I'll go downstairs to another room, and I will kneel and just lower myself before God and say, God, this day actually belongs to you. I'm giving you this day. As much as I want you to be in this project I'm working on today, these meetings I've got to lead, God, help this to work, or help this to succeed. What we're doing is we're trying to fit God into our priorities. And start your day by telling God that the day belongs to him. Your priority is to see that this day is his, and you're living in the day that he's given you. Ask God's Spirit to guide you, to give you wisdom, to give you opportunities in the day. And, to start this practice, I mean, it literally can take a minute to do this. Just start your day by giving the day to God, saying, God, this day belongs to you. All right, the second one is read his words. There's so much information overload today, and there's so much news, and the news can affect our morale and how we look at the world. Tense conversations that happen. We don't have a chance spiritually to live out the movement and voice and hope of God if we're not taking in his words, what he thinks, his worldview. So if you don't know where to start, read the book of Luke, the Gospel of Luke, or the Gospel of John. If you want to do a deeper dive on the purpose of the church and the power of the church in the world today, read Ephesians. Another thing that I do is sometimes I'll jot notes. When I'm understanding something from God, I'll jot down notes like, I think God is showing me this from Luke. I will sometimes read what I've already read. I'll read notes on something I've already read from God's words. And I'll remind myself, that's right. Last Monday, I was reading Luke chapter 10, or I was reading John 13. And I had this thought, oh, this is what humility looks like, or this is what real influence means. Okay, so start your day by giving the day to God. Read his words. Get in the habit of reading his words. And yes, you can listen to his words. The Bible app, YouVersion, the free app that many of us use, has an audio feature where you can actually just listen to scripture. The third thing is encourage someone in your church every day. Get into the practice of leaving a voice memo or a voicemail or texting someone, and get into the habit of once a week going to coffee or lunch with somebody in your church, someone specifically in your church. And this is why our coffee time out in the lobby matters. This is how we begin connecting with people or learning people's names. This is why groups in people's homes, midweek groups, matter. It's helping us connect. You know, the wine and cheese that Amy and I host, these matter because people learn each other's stories or get to know one another's names, and then you have a reference point for checking up on somebody or checking on how that thing's going at work or the parent that we're praying for. It's amazing the encouragement that I get when somebody leaves me a voice text or voicemail just saying, hey, thinking about you, Brad, and that thing that I know that you asked us to pray about. Okay, the fourth thing is ask for and watch for God to give you an opportunity to influence a skeptic. I mean, this is what it is to be light and salt in this world. God is going to give you opportunities daily, weekly, to be an example, a compelling example of his reality. So look for them. Just have your eyes open throughout the day. God's going to give me an opportunity. When you think that way, you notice them. You notice like, oh, this person's discouraged, or, oh, my neighbor just said this. I think they need some encouragement. God will give you opportunities to be a living example of his story in you if you just watch for them. Enjoy nature or creation every single day. You've got to work this into your day. And if you're not a nature freak, kind of like I am, and getting outside or walking around ponds at lunchtime, if that's not your thing, look for something God is creating right now in life or something he's making new. And this will connect you to God creator, not ancient God who existed a long time ago, but God who's alive and active today and making things new. All right, and the last thing, end your day thankful to God for something he's developing in you or something he's making new in you. And even if that's a challenge, you may be going through something challenging and wondering, where is God in this? I'm telling you, God will use the challenge and is using the challenge to either strip something away from you or to get rid of a distraction or to mature you in some way or to develop your faith. So even in challenge, end your day thanking God for what he's developing in you. We'll review this list in the coming weeks as this series continues, but I'm telling you, if you practice this, if you just start, spending a few minutes every day on these things, life is going to come out of it. You're going to see God like showing up in conversations, and you're going to see God using you in ways that just humble you and amaze you. Like, wow, I think God is actually at work in my life. You'll see God speaking to you in ways that guide you and encourage you. So begin owning your day spiritually, and instead of just surviving your day or trying to figure out where is God in my day, be proactive in these steps. Okay. All right. The third and last thing we're going to talk about today, this is really kind of the third message, has to do with number 4 on that list, being an example or light or encouragement or what Jesus called salt to people in our world who are far from him or outsiders of the church or skeptics in our world. This is part of the movement of God in our world today. Being part of the reality of Jesus' love in a world that can feel very far from God or really questions his reality. You and I are supposed to be the voice and story and example of God. He's chosen for the people of his church to be his reality today. And that can be so absolutely intimidating. Are you serious? God somehow wants to use me to convince someone else that he exists or to encourage others. And especially in today's world, in today's America, where America's so divided, we're divided politically, but we're also divided spiritually. If anybody, the thought of anybody just saying anything about their view of God just suddenly can put you in a certain ideology camp or a political camp. And so there's all the more reason for us to be super hesitant. It's like there's two types of people. There's the religious Christian crowd that is so open about their faith, and they maybe are the ones that the paradigm we see sort of protesting on street corners or being really loud on social media about their faith and really preachy. And then there's the rest of us who we don't want to be that, so we're kind of the opposite. We go really private with our faith. The last thing we want to do is offend somebody or push somebody further away from faith. That's the concern that a lot of people have. It's not that we really are afraid to say, hey, I'm a person of faith or Jesus is a part of my life. It's that we just genuinely don't want to push anyone further away. So I had a really interesting conversation with DJ about this about a month ago. Many of you know DJ Burkholder in our church, and he's about to leave with others to go back to school here in the coming week. DJ and I, back in July, had a really great conversation about this where he was just asking, hey, with my college friends, I'm trying to find the sweet spot on this. How do I want to be an example. There's times where I think they're looking at my faith and really respecting me. And there's other times I'm really quiet. I'll go weeks without saying anything about God or my faith. And I don't know if that's okay. And it was a super, super good conversation because it's something all of us relate to if we take our faith seriously. And if we take seriously this idea of being part of the most exciting idea on earth, that we're actually participating in his church. We're actually a part of the movement of Jesus in this world. Well, then we care about this. And so DJ told me that my response was super encouraging to him, and I've just decided I'm gonna pass along to you guys today some of what I told DJ that evening when we had this conversation. So what's relevant is my message on June 12th. June 12th was really kind of a precursor to what I'm about to say now. So it might be valuable to you to go back on our podcast or our YouTube channel and watch or listen again to the June 12th message about our language and our influence to our culture. And these are just kind of added thoughts today. I talked in that Sunday on June 12th about not leading into relationships or going into our relationships or friendships or conversations at work I've got to tell them about my faith. I've got to find a chance today to speak up and say, hey, this is what I believe about Jesus. That's really agenda-based rather than relational. Rather than caring about the person, you care more about trying to teach somebody what they should believe or telling somebody what they should believe. And man, that is messed up. That's what a lot of Christianity in recent memory has been built on or based on, really preaching at people. It's how Christianity's become so political. The idea that Christianity is really about telling people what they should believe or how they should behave. That's agenda-based religion, and it does nobody any good. What Jesus calls us to is to love. Agenda is trying to change a person, we talked about on June 12th. And love is genuinely trying to get to know a person, trying to get to know their story. All right, so that's kind of the background, and there was a lot more to the June 12th message. Go back and re-listen or rewatch that message. And as kind of a part two to those thoughts, I'm going to start with this. I volunteered for 5 years for the Washington Redskins. Now, the Washington football team, the Commanders. I have not gotten used to this name yet, and it may take me years to get used to the Commanders. I knew personally, my own youth pastor was the chaplain of the team for a while. Having church together as a team was really important to Joe Gibbs, and so I volunteered setting up the sound system and recording each of the chapel services for players who missed, and I got to travel to a Super Bowl with the team, and it was really a great experience. And then years later, a friend of mine here in South Riding asked me if I'd like to go on a business trip with him to Dallas for a couple nights, and we could just hang out and talk about questions of faith. And I said, sure, yeah, it worked in my schedule. And after we booked the tickets and planned the 2 nights in Dallas, we realized that the Washington-Dallas Monday night football game was happening during our trip there. And so we ended up getting tickets, and we were excited, and a lot of our friends were excited. Oh my gosh, represent Washington, And when we got to Dallas, it just kind of hit us like, do we want to represent Washington? Like, are we going to wear burgundy and gold into Cowboy Stadium, Texas Stadium? And we ended up deciding there's no way we're doing that. So we blended in that night. We just we didn't wear any red or gold, nothing that looked like Redskin colors. And we were incognito. I mean, everybody around us just assumed we were Cowboys fans. We were super intimidated at the thought of, being who we really were or expressing who we were really for. And we kind of hid in the crowd. We had great seats that night. It was a crazy game where at the end, Mark Brunell, the Washington quarterback, threw 2 touchdown passes in the last minute and a half or 2 minutes of the game. And Washington won. It shocked the stadium. The stadium just went super quiet. It emptied really fast. And maybe the 200 or 300 Washington fans that were in the stadium all gathered together on the 50-yard line at the end of the game, and we sang songs and we're cheering together, and some of the players came over to greet us there in the stands. And not until the stadium emptied did we become comfortable with our own people singing our own songs and just saying who we were. And man, how similar I think that is to our expression of faith. When we're together on Sunday morning, we'll sing and we'll laugh at stories about our faith or Jesus or how patient Jesus was with people or our own mess ups. But then when we leave the building, it's like, oh, now we're going back into the real world. And we kind of go into quiet mode again or super cautious mode again. And so DJ and I were having this conversation, like when do we put ourselves out there to be the movement of Jesus, to actually influence others? And when is that wrong? Like when is that pressuring people or making things awkward? And so I asked DJ just to tell me about his friends. Like, who are you thinking about? Like when you're... And he specifically started naming some friends, roommates and buddies that he's met at college that he really cares about. And as we were talking about this, it became apparent to me that there are some guys at college that DJ doesn't know that well. He just sees from time to time in classes or at football games, or maybe there's a party at somebody's place and he'll run into them again. But then there are some guys that he really cares about. And he knows some of their story and sicknesses at home or with family members in some of these guys' stories, and where he's more in their life and they're more in his life. And so we started talking about those guys. And I said this to DJ. I said, there's a difference between telling somebody in a conversation where, somebody's dad is sick at home, or there's somebody struggling with a class, or there's a big test coming up, or just life stuff is being talked about, and DJ sees like, oh, this is a conversation where I could tell my story that involves my trust in God or something God's done in my life. And I said there's a huge difference in those moments between telling someone what God thinks they're doing wrong in their behavior or the way they're living their life in some way, and telling them the good that God sees in them. And we started talking about why does the church and church history, why does so many churches, especially maybe not especially in the last 100 years, maybe it's been the last 300 years, or just depending on what part of church history you look at, we see the temptation, or how easy it is, or how lazy it is for churches to tell the outside world about God by telling them what they're doing wrong, or the choices they're making are wrong, or their behavior is wrong. And I said, DJ, imagine if in one of these conversations you tell a friend, I pray. Or, God was kind of distant to me, and God's become more important in my life. And I just want to tell you, I think you're really being a good son when you're so concerned about your dad back home. Or I really think God honors the struggle you're in right now. And, he admires you. And DJ immediately was like, well, that would be encouraging. And I said, yeah, that's the difference. Somehow it's gotten worked into our culture that if we take a stand for God, or we tell our faith story, we've somehow got to tell people they've got to correct their life or the way they live. Like, where in the world does that come from? How encouraging is it if we can affirm someone's struggle or challenge, or some kind of life that they're breathing into in a situation that's hard, by saying, man, God honors you, or God believes in you, or I'm telling you, I've been there, and I think you're doing okay. That suddenly makes people more interested in, well, you think God is giving me favor right now, or you think God isn't like judging me? It makes people more open to the love of God, and changes the paradigm that God may be judging. Here's one scripture of so many that I could choose from here. This is in Mark chapter 2, Mark 2:16. When the scribes, the religious Pharisees, the religious experts, saw that Jesus was eating with sinners and tax collectors, they said to his disciples, why does he do this? Why does Jesus, who claims to be religious, and he never claimed to be religious, he actually claimed to be God in the flesh, here in person. Religion is often man-made, guilt-driven constructs. In their minds, Jesus is supposed to be this religious example who claims to be from God, but he spends time with unclean people. They say unclean people. Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners and claim to be from God? He's contradicting himself. And Jesus goes on to say, this is exactly who I came to be with. I came to be with people far from God, and people who are hurting, or people who think they're unclean or who have messed up. What drew outsiders and even sinners, those who were somehow openly opposed to God or the way of God, what drew these people so close to Jesus that they're constantly around Jesus and giving their lives to him and becoming believers in him and becoming disciples and followers of him? They actually became the movement of God's love in this world. What is it that drew them to Jesus? Instead of telling people from our faith what they should believe politically, or how they're living their life out of bounds from God, what if instead we told them what God sees in them that's good, or how God is behind them in their struggle or their challenge, and he's for them and he never leaves them, and that we've learned that from our own example. DJ was telling me about two particular friends that he really has grown to care about, and just life situation stuff. They've really become buddies, and they've been able to talk about life in certain ways. One of them, he said, is always interested in whoever's in the room, whoever's talking, this friend. I've noticed that he's always interested in the person, and he'll remember conversations and bring them up later. And I said, DJ, what if What if you told them that you believe God has put them in your life? What if you told this friend, man, this is something I really value in you. I've noticed that you pay attention and prioritize anybody who's talking, anybody new, anybody in the room, old friends, new friends. And I really believe God has put you in my life to encourage me. What is their response going to be to God? Are they going to get angry that you mentioned God? And he said, no, I can't imagine that. They're probably going to think, well, that's encouraging. And I said, that's exactly right. When we follow the example of Jesus, Jesus learns everybody's story. He genuinely cares about their situation and life circumstance and story. And then he breathes life into them. Jesus doesn't ridicule or tell people where they're wrong politically. Jesus tells about their future of good and the future that he has for them. And I told DJ, when you say something to the effect of, man, I think this is just a trait that God's given you, that you care about people or that you pay attention. When you relate that to your faith, that describes the God that they're actually craving. Just like air or oxygen or water, that we're made for these everyday needs in life, we are made to be in connection with God. And whether people know it or not, they are craving the encouragement of God. And so when you give them a dose of it, it just wakes them up. Like, wait, you think God likes something that I do, or something in my personality is from God? Yeah, I really do. I really do. And I thank God for you. As a friend, you thank God for me? It completely reverses the paradigm from God is judging you, or God's view of you is you've stepped out of line, to this God who actually loves us and is for us. I told DJ, even atheists tell me. I have many friends. I invest in friends who are admitted atheists who will say, Brad, I don't believe there is a God. I have quite a few atheist friends in my life who I care about deeply. And quite a few of them, I've learned this pattern over the years, will actually say to me, Brad, you're making me think differently about God. I've never thought about God this way. Or how a believer can think about God differently than as an angry judge in the sky. This is a regular conversation that comes up with me often, because I'm not interested in this angry God in the sky who's judging everybody. That's a control mechanism of religion and of religious leaders to get people to do what religious institutions want them to do. It's a fear tactic to try to scare people away from hell into heaven. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. It really pushed me away from God for a while when I was a teenager, and I thought, the angry God is the God who engages us. When you are introduced to the God who actually comes into this world in love, he physically came here to rescue us and to show us how much he loves us. When that becomes the focus in conversations, that God is for you and God made you with a great future in mind, well, suddenly you're more interested in that kind of God. I want to leave you with these early texts in the book of Acts. Acts is the letter, the narrative in the New Testament that is the early history of the church, the first generation church that Jesus created, starting with the church in Jerusalem. Those who embraced Peter's message were baptized into the church, into the faith in Jesus. And about 3,000 were added to the believers in that one day alone. You read a few verses later and we read this. These early believers, growing in numbers, were praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being rescued by Jesus' love. If we took the time to look into chapter 4 and chapter 5, we see that the church is exploding in growth. More and more people are actually choosing to believe in Jesus and the way of Jesus because of the voice and the message and the stories of the church. It wasn't a deterrent. It wasn't judgmental. It was so compelling and attractive because people are just The people of the church were speaking the love and beauty of God's heart for those outside the church. And so the takeaway that DJ and I had together in that conversation was, man, when you see an opportunity to tell your story, your faith story, in a conversation with someone you've built trust with, don't focus on, of course not, and DJ would never do this, but let's get out of our minds the idea that faith has to somehow tell people what they're doing wrong. Our faith story should be telling people that God is for them, as God is for me, and I've learned to trust that. And that God is with you, even in the challenge and even in the hurt. And there are qualities about you where I see God in you. I see a glimpse of the nature and image of God in you that makes me grateful that you're a friend. When we speak with that kind of faith language, at the very least, it lowers people's paradigm of seeing and hearing God as an angry, judgmental God, and it softens them to, wow, maybe God's encouraging. Maybe what God has worked in my friend here and in his church or her church is encouragement and life and good. I wanted to share the conversation with DJ with all of you because I think it relates to all of us seeing how practical we can be the movement of God in our world today. And if you pray that fourth step in our day, God, give me opportunities today. Help me to be light and encouragement and hope to someone, a skeptic today. He will do it. He will start opening your attention and eyes to neighbors or friends or coworkers in situations, in conversations where you can actually tell your faith story. And if we tweak our perspective a little bit from the ugly in church history of God's judgment and telling people that they've got to get right with God or they're sinful or they're going to, it's just crazy. It's ridiculous how that paradigm has taken hold of our culture. And we just look for opportunities to, with God's encouraging voice, speak life into someone. It's going to open them up to what they're craving. A God who loves and a God who created for good and a God who has a plan for their lives. I love you, Dulles family. Let's practice these things. Let's walk these out. I'll email out the 6 steps of owning our day and being connected to God every day. We'll talk about them again in weeks to come. Let's practice them. Let's start practicing them today and tomorrow morning when we wake up. And we're going to see God using us in everyday life. There's nothing more exciting to me than the thought of God using people like you and me to encourage and give life in this super dark, often depressing world. This world is waiting for life and hope and good, and it's going to come from you and me. Jesus working through you and me. I love you guys. Have a really great week. I can't wait to speak and be back with you next Sunday.